My golden sister convinced our parents to give her my business. She ran it into bankruptcy, so I bought it back and left her with nothing. My name is Lily, I'm 27, and if you've ever thought life was a smooth ride with predictable turns, you're in for a reality check. My story is far from a fairy tale. It's messy, raw, and full of the kind of twists that make you question everything. Let me introduce you to my older sister, Victoria. She's 30, the classic golden child. You know the type. Flawless long hair, a smile that can light up a room, and eyes that draw people in with promises of heaven, all while hinting at the possibility of hell. My parents adored her. They spoke of her as if she was the answer to every prayer, the reason the sun shone. And me? I was the shadow, the second thought, the one who got a well done with no spark behind it. Victoria breezed through life, taking what she wanted, basking in the attention and privileges that came without effort. Meanwhile, I was grinding. I stayed up long after the house was quiet, fueled by stubborn ambition, piecing together my dream bit by bit. That dream was my business, built from endless late nights, mistakes turned into lessons, and moments where failure loomed. But I pushed through. It wasn't just work. It was my identity, proof that I could stand on my own. And it thrived. It became something I was proud of, something I thought no one could take from me. But today, that belief was shattered. I walked into my parents' house, immediately hit by an unnatural tension. The air felt thick, and an uneasy silence wrapped around me. Mom sat on the couch, her eyes lit up with excitement that didn't feel genuine, like she was playing a role in some bad play. Dad was nursing his favorite mug, his fingers drumming nervously against it as if it might crack under the pressure. And there stood Victoria, poised, dressed to perfection, with that slight, almost smug smile playing at her lips, a look that screamed she was already a step ahead of everyone in the room. "Lily, we have news," Mom began, using that overly sweet tone she reserved for moments she knew would catch me off guard. Her enthusiasm was forced, and I braced myself for the impact. "We've decided to hand over the management of your business to Victoria. She'll help expand it." There's a moment when words enter your ears, but your mind can't or won't believe them, like your brain throws up a defense wall. That's what happened then. "What?" was all I could manage, though I could feel my heart pounding and a wave of cold anger spreading through me. Victoria stepped forward, the confident clack of her designer heels filling the room. She tilted her head slightly, adopting an expression of fake humility that made my skin crawl. "Lily, I think we can do something great together," she said, as if she were offering me a favor, not taking my life's work. Something great. That was rich coming from her. In Victoria's world, something great meant taking credit for things she never built, basking in glory while others picked up the pieces of her mess. She always managed to turn chaos into an art form, making it seem like she was the hero when she was really the storm. The room seemed to close in on me as I tried to keep my composure, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I knew, deep down, that the empire I'd built with sleepless nights and endless resolve was slipping out of my grasp and into the hands of the person who least deserved it. Family dinner. The atmosphere was tense, suffocating, each breath feeling heavy. It was the same scene as always. Mom perched on her chair with a look of anticipation. Her eyes locked onto Victoria like she was watching the opening act of a Broadway show she'd waited her whole life to see. Dad, ever the silent presence, stared at his plate, as if the answers to every question he'd ever had were written in the pattern of the mashed potatoes. And Victoria, the queen of this little kingdom, sat confidently, shoulders back, her smile a beacon of self-assurance that could charm anyone who didn't know better. "Dear ones, I'm confident that with the right approach, our business can reach new heights," she declared, her voice smooth and poised, each word delivered like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. The smile she flashed was so radiant it could dazzle an entire crowd on a summer day. And just like that, my parents nodded in agreement, spellbound by her as if she were a prophet speaking the gospel. I felt my chest tighten, the familiar sting of frustration simmering beneath the surface. Every nod from them was a dismissal of everything I'd built. Victoria's speech rolled on, full of buzzwords and the kind of optimism that only comes from someone who's never had to fight for what they have. I sat there, jaw clenched, remembering the countless nights I stayed up until dawn, eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets, hands trembling from too much caffeine and too little sleep. The stress, the pressure, it all surged back with each polished sentence she spoke. She made it sound so easy, so simple, like building a business from the ground up was as effortless as reciting her lines at a family dinner. I don't mean to be rude, but I'd like to remind everyone that I worked on this business every day. I spoke, keeping my voice steady but unable to hide the edge that slipped through. My eyes met Victoria's, and for a second, there was silence. She turned to me with a look of exaggerated surprise, as if I'd just proposed something ridiculous, like a marathon in heels. Dad lifted his head, and the moment his eyes locked with mine, I felt that familiar pang of disappointment. His gaze was sharp, cold, a silent reprimand that made me feel smaller. "Give Victoria a chance, Lily. She deserves it," he said, each word landing with the weight of a hammer. There it was, the final judgment, delivered like a decree. Deserves. The word rang in my ears, hollow and unjust, turning the simmering frustration into a deep, seething hurt. The room went quiet again, a pause so thick you could cut it with a knife. I glanced around, trying to find some trace of acknowledgement for my hard work, but there was none. Mom's gaze was fixed on Victoria, admiration glittering in her eyes. Victoria, meanwhile, looked pleased, her lips curling up just enough to show that she knew she'd won this round. The silence stretched on, and the air seemed to close in around me, pressing down on my chest. I swallowed hard, the taste of bitterness thick on my tongue. If they wanted to watch Victoria take what I built and mold it into her own version of success, so be it. But I knew, deep down, that this moment wasn't the end. The resentment that coiled inside me wouldn't dissipate with time. It was hardening into something stronger. Determination. I'd let them believe in their perfect daughter for now, let them bask in the glow of her empty promises. But I would make sure that when this chapter closed, I'd be the one turning the final page. A few months trickled by, each one more chaotic than the last. And wouldn't you know it? My instincts had been dead on. Victoria had taken my business, my hard-earned, late-night blood, sweat, and tears creation, and turned it into a full-scale circus. And not the fun kind with clowns and laughter. No, this was a 3-ring disaster where the only performers were the frazzled employees trying to keep the show running. Her decisions were a mess of impulses, made with the thoughtfulness of a teenager choosing between chocolate and vanilla ice cream at midnight. And it showed. The office transformed into a scene out of a crisis movie. Staff darted around, eyes wide with confusion and panic, as if someone had hit the panic button but forgotten to tell them where the emergency exits were. The buzz of hurried conversations and the clatter of rushed steps filled the air, echoing the sense of a ship taking on water. And oh, the reports. I dreaded those weekly financial updates more than I ever thought possible. Each one was a masterpiece of bad news, reading like it came straight from the underworld. The losses weren't just noticeable, they were monumental, stacking up faster than a reality TV star's follower count post-scandal. I half expected one of those reports to come across my desk stamped in bold red with, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter." Our most loyal clients, the ones I had spent years wooing, building trust with, started pulling back, disappearing one by one. It was as if they'd caught a whiff of the chaos Victoria was stirring up and decided to jump ship before it sank completely. Watching them go, after all the time and effort I'd invested, felt like a knife twisting deeper each day. And yet, there was Victoria, standing tall and confident, assuring anyone who would listen that this was merely a temporary setback. Temporary setback? That was like calling a catastrophic lab explosion a minor experimental hiccup. Mom and Dad, ever faithful to their golden daughter, watched with anxious eyes. I could see the cracks forming in their belief system, but they clung to their mantra like it was a life raft. Victoria just needs a little more time, they would say, over and over, as if repeating it could somehow breathe life back into the chaos she had created. Their voices carried hope at first, but it wavered, melting slowly like ice cream on a hot day, dribbling away in helpless drips. And I sat back, a silent witness to the downfall, watching as their confidence in Victoria began to erode, piece by painful piece. At first, it was almost tragic, like watching someone cling desperately to a sinking ship, refusing to accept reality. But as the weeks wore on, and the ridiculousness of the situation deepened, I started to see the irony, almost laughable in its absurdity. So, Mom, Dad, take a look now. How's your golden daughter holding up? Because from where I'm sitting, the shine is starting to tarnish, and it's not a pretty sight. The disaster was inevitable, looming over us like a dark cloud, and it unfolded as predictably as the climax of a bad movie. The company that once thrived under my meticulous management now lay in ruins. Every day, Victoria tried to piece it back together with the metaphorical equivalent of duct tape and wishful thinking. But business doesn't run on smiles and hope, and she was learning that the hard way. Good luck with that, sweetheart. Contracts that used to flow in like clockwork? Gone. The key clients I'd fought tooth and nail to secure with long hours, calls at all hours of the night, and the kind of persistence that left me bone-tired? They slipped away, one by one, leaving a trail of polite goodbye emails. Each message, no matter how delicately worded, screamed the truth between the lines. Thanks for the show, but we're done here. Victoria, once the queen bee strutting through the office with her high heels and flashy smile, now wore a different expression, one of bewilderment and panic. Her face had that wide-eyed look of a kid who just found out Santa isn't real. The realization hitting that maybe, just maybe, she was in over her head. Then came the blame game, as sure as night follows day. First up, the employees. You're all just not motivated enough. Victoria's voice cut through the office like a whip. She stood there, eyes darting around the room as if expecting everyone to suddenly snap into shape under her glare. But motivation isn't conjured from thin air, and you could see the exhaustion and doubt etched on their faces. The office, once a place of determined energy and focus, now felt like a sinking ship where everyone was frantically looking for life jackets. Next, she turned her wrath on the clients themselves. They just don't understand what we're offering, she fumed, eyes blazing with frustration. Her voice echoed in the boardroom, but all I could picture were our former clients shaking their heads from a distance, rolling their eyes at the absurdity. It wasn't that they didn't understand. It was that they'd seen the chaos from a mile away and wanted no part of it. And then, the pièce de résistance, the turn on our parents. "You're the ones who told me I should take over!" she screamed, her voice cracking with the raw edge of desperation. Mom's eyes flickered with worry, shifting nervously as she glanced at Dad, who sat stone-faced, staring into the distance as if he could find answers there. His silence was heavy, a mix of regret and disappointment that even Victoria could feel. The unspoken truth hovered in the air. They had backed her, believed in her confidence. But now, reality was glaring them all in the face. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, an uninvited spectator to this unraveling performance. The absurdity of it all felt like watching a tragicomedy where everyone is oblivious to the punchline except the audience. The room buzzed with tension, a mix of silent shame and spoken frustration. Victoria's once polished composure was gone, replaced by someone scrambling to keep her crown from slipping. But it was too late for that. As I observed the fallout, a strange calm settled over me. The resentment I'd felt for months had transformed into a cold, unwavering resolve. There was no room for sympathy. She had dug this grave herself. The thought crystallized in my mind, sharp and certain. Her time is up. The golden daughter they'd placed all their bets on was finally facing the reality that not everything can be won with charm alone. When the time came to act, I knew waiting was no longer an option. It was a moment that screamed, "Make your move, Lily, or fade into history as another victim of the Golden Sister." And you know what? I made my move. I called the creditors and investors with such confidence they probably thought I'd just won the lottery. I proposed a deal, buying the company for a token amount that would cover their losses, ensuring no one was left in the red. And yes, they agreed faster than a teenager double-tapping a meme post. Within a week, I was once again the owner of my company. It was a moment worthy of an epic soundtrack and fireworks. The ownership documents glistened in my hands like a ticket to a brighter future. Victoria? Oh, this was my favorite act. She didn't even realize what had happened until she got the official notice. You should have seen her face. A mix of shock, rage, and that look when you understand you've lost something important, but it's too late. She stared at me as if I'd just stolen her favorite toy. I shrugged and said, "Well, Victoria, it looks like your management style didn't quite pan out, huh?" When Victoria found out the company was mine again, she stormed into my office like she was ready for the showdown of the century. I sat at my desk, sipping cold coffee and going over reports as if nothing was amiss. The door flew open so hard even the cactus on the windowsill flinched. And there she was, seething, eyes blazing as if they could bore a hole through my skull. I half expected the papers on my desk to catch fire from her glare. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice piercing the silence like a siren at 3 a.m. Victoria was literally shaking with rage, her perfectly styled hair starting to come undone. I paused, looked at her with an expression like she'd just asked why water is wet. "I saved what you ruined," I said calmly, taking another sip of coffee, as if we were discussing the weather and not the end of her empire. My composure seemed to enrage her even more. Her face twisted in fury, and I could have sworn I saw a nerve twitch near her eye. She stood there, fists clenched so tight her knuckles were white, but she couldn't find the words. The silence stretched out, but it was golden. She knew she had lost, and I knew she knew. "The exit is over there," I added, nodding toward the door with a slight smirk that only made her angrier. She turned and left, trailing defeat and disappointment in her wake. Family gatherings after that drama were like an episode of a trashy reality show. Oh, you should have seen my parents' faces. The confusion in their eyes was almost comical, like they'd just discovered milk doesn't pour itself from the fridge. Their golden daughter, their perennial favorite, had failed. They sat at the table, nervously fiddling with napkins and giving me sideways glances as if I were the curse they hadn't noticed before. Victoria, usually radiant, now looked like her personal ship called "I'm the Queen of the World," had hit an iceberg and sunk before everyone's eyes. No blinding smile could hide the cracks in her carefully maintained facade. She babbled about new projects that were supposedly going to bring her success any day now. Her stories sounded as convincing as diet bars promising to make you look 10 years younger. "I have a plan," she assured our parents with a smile that looked more like a grimace of desperation. If I got $1 for every time I heard her say she had a brilliant plan, I'd already be living in a mansion in LA overlooking the ocean. My parents tried to play the role of supportive spectators in this play, propping up her crumbling reputation like a house of cards in a breeze. But the truth was obvious even to them. Their perfect Victoria couldn't hide her downfall behind her glossy image anymore. My business thrived again, and this time it wasn't just, oh, how nice Lily managed something. No, it was real. Wow, this girl knows what she's doing. The office buzzed with energy, and I was at the center of the action, but this time without the nervous tick or the fear of someone barging in with another brilliant idea to wreck everything. I was stronger, wiser, and, to be honest, learned to trust only one person, myself. Victoria? Oh, she was left with nothing but empty hands and a dull stare. Her glittering outfits and feigned confidence no longer fooled even our parents. They finally saw who had kept this family's boat afloat all along. And you know what? I no longer needed their approval. Those endless attempts to earn their praise faded with my rose-colored illusions. They could clap for the moon for all I cared, but I knew one thing. My strength came from my own hands and determination. Every day when I left the office, I saw my reflection in the glass door and couldn't help but smile. Not just a smile of contentment, but a grin that said I now held all the cards. Victoria no longer had power over me, couldn't manipulate my dreams or fears. And as I looked at my reflection, I thought, now, I am the winner. The lesson was simple. The world may cast you in the shadows, but in the end, it's you who decides whether to stay there.